Welcome everyone to yet another SDN Community Voices, our weekly community touchpoint with you, members and followers of the Service Design Network. My name is Felipe. I am an ambassador here at SDN, and as always, I am your host. And today I'm excited to have Frank Spillers with me, who is a CEO, CXO, UX service design lead at Experience Dynamics, joining us. And today's topic is a lot about inclusive design and trying to understand how to get maturity of inclusive design. So before we dive in, a quick reminder to drop your questions in the chat. We address them by the end of the Q&A segment, and also interact with us by saying which part of the world you're tuning in. So now let's bring Frank to the stage.
Hello,
Hey.
everyone. Hi, Felipe. Thank you so much for that introduction. Nice to see
Hey.
everyone, be here with fellow service designers and others.
Yeah. And I'll ask, I mean, I did a quick introduction for you, but you can introduce yourself also if you want.
Yeah, so I have some slides today and just a little, presentation, I guess. And I have an intro on there. Is it okay if I bring that up? And
Yeah, we can go directly, jump right in.
all right. So welcome everyone to Building Inclusive Service Design Maturity. These are the key points I think you need to know about me. I've been in the field for 25 years. I'm a service designer, consultant, and also a trainer. I'm working on a book on managing UX. Today's topic is about the organizational side of inclusive design, not so much at the asset level, but more at how you get organizations to build it into service design methods. So I'll be talking about that. Some of the material from that upcoming book. I've also been doing training with Interaction Design Foundation. I've been training privately, corporate teams. So people like Amazon, Apple, and many other companies have taken my online trainings, and then over 150,000 designers at the Interaction Design Foundation, developers, product people. I do service design training and consulting at Experience Dynamics, and also I set up a mentoring community in 2020 that's still going. I just introduced an open circle to my inner circle, which is free master classes and mini classes. So if you're interested, I'll mention it at the end as well. You can see if today is useful, and then maybe if it is, you can join that for more if you want it. You can't beat free. It's actually 30 minutes, not 90 here. So that's the first typo I see here. Today's session, I want you to understand what is this inclusive design, inclusive service design. And so blending inclusive design with service design. Also, I want you to identify organizational success criteria so that you know what this looks like. And as Felipe said, it's a maturity lens, of like, how do you build this practice? And finally, it's where to start or just start. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So because we only have 30 minutes, let's dive in. And speaking about objectives, maybe some of you have seen this already. Like first when we talk about inclusiveness, this word equity, like we don't really use the word equality anymore, but the word equity. And so there's a definition there, but the illustration does a nice job, right? The reality over here, as we see like with accessibility efforts. And then the last one, they're just reminding us that liberation is, systemic barrier removed, providing justice. And so inclusive design really just summed up by this need to pivot our efforts towards equity. I like to, the quick explanation I like to give of equity is it's like shoes. When you're shopping for shoes, you have a shoe size, right? And you don't care about any of the other shoe sizes. Like you don't shop low or high, you shop for your shoe size. Well, that becomes a bias because then that's all you care about. That's all you're noticing. You don't go to those other sizes, you don't think about them, and they're not familiar to you. And usually you wouldn't shop outside of your size. So because of that, what we're talking about is looking at all sizes, and we're talking about making sure that there aren't those people with the larger foot size or the smaller foot size know exactly what I'm talking about when it's hard to find a shoe that fits. We also challenge this notion of the norm, like your shoe size is normal for you, it's the norm for you, and you just assume that everyone has that normal shoe size or that shoe size range. And we find out, in real life, that's not the case. So what does inclusive design mean to you? Maybe you can describe in 3 words as if you're talking to a stakeholder, maybe just a couple minutes. And I want you to just, if you're attending this live, if you're attending it later, then, you can do the exercise, I guess, with the recording. Thanks for tuning in. So go ahead. I think you should be able to use the chat over there.
Yeah. So we can have people just right there in the chat 3 words that they use to describe.
Exactly. What does equity and design mean, or inclusive design?
I think we can keep on going, and then we see what are the people kind of putting there.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. Good idea. So with inclusive design, we seek to correct those injustices that we saw in that illustration, and to not perpetuate inclusion problems. That means access issues, visibility, right, of representation, of seeing yourself in a product advertisement or in a product that was designed for your needs. We're trying to avoid stereotypes and those biases, as well as just misunderstood user needs. And AI is really like a spotlight issue right now for inclusive design. And the reason might be like this one recently was Google Gemini released their image AI product, like I guess it's 2 or 3 months ago. And it produced this historically inaccurate, thing that led Sundar Pichai to say that Google Gemini offended our users and had shown bias. And he also said that we screwed up, I think was the actual words he used. What's interesting, I think, and important about that story, though, is that Google's former ethicist who was working on the ethics side of things at Google said that the reason why Gemini went out like with this problem is because Google rushed it. Google has an inclusive design process. The reason Google's inclusive design process is so good right now in terms of the industry, and a good one to learn from and to model, is because they have experienced so many problems over the years. And that's the topic of many books. Stories are in many books. And so yeah, like rushing and not doing the due diligence is it can come back to bite you, as Google learned here. And so that's why this is important. So why inclusive services? Well, let me just extend this definition. So you're probably thinking inclusivity, that means accessibility, right? Users with disabilities. It does, and then we'll find out that it's actually more than that as well. It's important to recognize that it's not just a technical task to do accessibility, and that you should and can take a disability first design approach. So designers can be involved in making sure that disability and those equity needs are expressed up front. So what else is there outside of, this inclusive design we hear Microsoft talking about, and they just focus on accessibility? We're talking about extending this notion of inclusion to underrepresented users who are historically left out, so-called edge users, and diverse lived experiences. And important that we understand those and bring those into our design decision making, so that we don't make those kind of problems, or with AI allow it to perpetuate that kind of social harm. And then we have service design, right? That service design just can't be service design. It needs to be equity led. Think about this as like a personalization and customization of a service, right? We see more and more of that. And I think we're going into this, next few decades where hyper personalization, customization from, maybe even AI all the way to the factory output that you get in the mail from your, product design or whatever. There have been attempts to that, but we're starting to move into the age where that's maybe a little bit more possible. At least we're starting to see services that are more streamlined towards user needs. And in service design, we talk about omni-channel, like, a user can jump from their phone to a chat, to a call center, to a store, and then back to their phone. and then maybe download a mobile app and continue from there, QR code back to their, and back and forth. So it's this omni-channel. And it's the key there is if we're going to honor that, then we need to do that equitably, that because access means, so we take the spirit of omni-channel and we just extend that. It also means that we need to be doing disability advocacy, not just user advocacy, and not just disability advocacy, but inclusion advocacy to that, extended not just for folks with disabilities, but to folks that have historically been left out. And like, let's call it full stack inclusion in service design, that inclusivity or inclusiveness is not just something we do at the end or we think about during. It's not just an inspiration. It's not a post on Instagram. It's a set of processes that we do. Just to back up to an example of this is a legal requirement to have a ramp for a wheelchair, but then it can also be used by a bike and a push chair with a baby, right? So you've seen this, you've heard this example before, right? Here we have what's called an accommodation, because there we had the stairs, but now we've put the ramp in because we have to accommodate. Again, it's the law. But that accommodations kind of approach maybe is a little bit flawed because it's just, again, checking a box, not necessarily designing something equitably. You have the access around the back corner. Usually it's at the back of the building, it seems like. And then there's this, which just to show you, it's just a lovely like incorporation of, so you have stairs and ramp in this design, which has more equity focus. And you won't hear me talking much about universal design because universal design just doesn't work. We need to update our definition. It's this aspirational thing that we've kicked around for 40 years. And it just doesn't work. It's too much equality in that equality area of like, well, if we make it equal and universal, everybody will benefit. And really what we're saying is, no, go to equity, go to the person that has the most need, wait and stop and listen on their needs. So I have another one for you, and then I'll check up on your last chat, see if that worked. We had solutions meeting the needs of varied users. Yeah, thanks, Sonny. On the last one. So on this one, the question I've got for you is, what gender inclusion elements should you factor in if designing a public park? And think about, I'll just give you just the one quick question is, should it be opened or closed spaces for socializing in this public park? I want you, the point here is to start thinking about inclusion as an upfront approach. So what do you think about this one if you're live? And if you're watching the recording later, you can still do the activity for now. And I think we'll maybe allow those few minutes and let folks think about that if you're on the live stream.
Yeah, I think what you're saying before, we can just talk a little bit while people are kind of answering, I would say, about equity and universal design really hits home a little bit for me, because I remember when I was looking at inclusivity doing my master's, I saw that thing of inclusive, universal, and it was like so many different ways to put it in a similar way. And what do you think about all this terminology? Like, does it help? Does it make it worse? Or
yeah, let me turn it back to this little activity I had, because I want you to, the reason I have these, I want you to interact with the content, right, as opposed to the Netflix version of the presentation today. And so so what would be a kind of equity centered approach to the just gender, to just that lens when it comes to social spaces in a park? So think about privacy, think about protection. Now, are everybody's so a universal design would say, let's make it equal for both genders. If there are both genders, wait a minute, there aren't both genders, there aren't two genders. Gender is a social construct, so there are many genders. So what's it like to go in a park if you're a trans individual? What's it like to go in a park if you're non-binary? What's it like to go in a park if you're a woman specifically? And so that's the question for you. And I'm not going to answer it for you because I want you to think about this for just a moment. What do you think? Can we, are we unmuted, like with Mike? Can we have someone like actually speak to us? And maybe less.
I don't know. We can
Pushing the
try. Never tried
guarantee.
that.
The service
I never
design.
tried that. I
I
will
mean,
try that, but in the
think about
meanwhile,
think about this online event in terms of safety, in terms of privacy, in terms of sharing, and then take that into a public park. So we're thinking city design here, by the way, not just right. So while you're thinking about that, and our 3 minutes are up, I'll give you some examples of in Austria in particular. Vienna is supposed to be one of the safest cities in the world for women in particular. And what they found, like more and wider entrances, well lit, different size spaces for girls to socialize and for informal activities. So it's like um, not necessarily open or organized spaces that like you would think for, like, say, competitive sports or some gathering of groups of people, but more sort of private and informal spaces. That one surprised me because I'm thinking of the safety issue, but I'm thinking of that from a male bias perspective, that my lived experience doesn't include the catcalling, the shouting, the threatening, the physical, following experience that females endure. And that's not even to speak about the kind of harassment that trans folks endure. I remember I was on a plane in America, and there was a trans flight attendant, and there were these guys. I think it was America, it was somewhere in the world, and they were they were teasing and making fun of the flight attendant, like on the flight. There's these three guys in the row, and because of what they saw, so that's the worst side of not taking an equity-centered approach is, of course, we would never do that, but what we would do is we would embed our biases quietly, silently into designs without even checking them. And this is all about checking, right? So in Malmo, the same thing happened with their park design, and city officials just basically involved and centered girls in the design of the park. And if you want more on that gender bias, data bias, and male bias, check out that book, Invisible Women, if you haven't already read it. There's an example of a lighting. So it said well lit. A lot of the literature suggests well lit is like safe, right? But in this particular study that was just done like a year or two ago and applied, I think, in London, the they took a human-centered design approach to lighting, and it was like the surface illumination and the context of what was happening around. So I'll look at all these layers. Like, so again, this is what human-centered design does. It's not just lighting or no lighting or good lighting or bad lighting, but it's this nuance of context sensitive or context aware uh, that is important. And then add the gender lens, and there you go. So let's talk about, you've seen some examples, you understand the importance of equity centered design hopefully by now. Let's talk about the maturity criteria. So how do you do this? Like, if you take what I said as a designer, you accidentally embed your biases, right, in or developer. And then, so how organizationally do you surface these? So user research is critical for ongoing decision making. The question is, do you do it with stakeholders? And of course, it's important to define these are users, not just internal stakeholders. It's both types of stakeholders important, but do you do this user research with, not at? And so participatoriness is what I'm pointing to, and I'll talk a little bit about that here. If you look at this very famous Sherry Arnstein ladder of citizen participation, maybe you've seen this before. So a lot of our work happens like at this level, especially with disability consultation, especially with most UX, including ethnography, can be somewhere up here. And really the point that we haven't really gotten to, and it's people like Victor Uduea, former NASA service design lead, and you can check out Google Radical Participatory Design, or RPD as he calls it. It's about bringing those users right into your process and centering them. And literally, when he was at NASA, he got budget to hire users and bring them on. And you do a 50-50, so you have like 50% of your users, and then 50% of your team, so that you're never far away from the equity conversation. Here's what that looks like for youth participation. And while you're looking at that, maybe Felipe, do you have any thoughts or questions here, or anybody in the audience want to stop? And this issue of participatory design, again, another great idea from the Scandinavian countries. I know, Felipe, you're in one of the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, I'm here in Sweden.
The Scandinavians get participation in that social design very intuitively. But the thing I've realized, it's not enough, because not every society is contexted with that type of sensitivity. You go to Denmark, go to Sweden, Norway, Finland, and you see the social design is in the car parking. It's in everything you touch. Every touch point has a policy level participatory process. Maybe not as Curitiba, as much as Curitiba in Brazil, which has like participatory decision making in the local government, which is like, whoa, even Rio doesn't have that, or Brasilia. But so it's a Curitiba thing. It's like a model or whatever. But the thing is, like, these aren't enough. Like, how do you transfer these to your context? How do you transfer participatory design so that it's functional and it doesn't like fail? Or co-design. Co-design, lovely. Yeah, again, another Scandinavian thing, like back in the 70s, like defined. Great, but can you transport it into your corporate, government, nonprofit, or just your entrepreneurial or startup environment? And so how can you figure out how to do that? That's your homework, by the way. This is from Policy Lab, a project of the UK government. It's actually a little group that does this type of work. And so you can see that same ladder being applied here, and you can see where co-design is here. We're up at that upper level. It's good, but you can also do tokenism. You can do that. Co-design can often lead to consultation. It can dip down. Same with ethnography. You can excellently interview users in ethnographic interviews, right? Instead of observing and instead of bringing them into your, in this case, like a policy decision process. And, so instead of one workshop or one user attendance, it's multiple, it's all along the way. It's really shifting that power up to that upper, what's called co-production. If you look at so check this out. It's a Google for you. It's Service Design Transformation Maturity Index. So a lot of the service design maturity models that I'm aware of, and I told you I'm writing a book on UX management. If I'm wrong about this, please get in touch with me straight away. But a lot of these, the only models that I'm aware of come from the UK. One is from the Local Government Association. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just to say this is what they have in it. We might update that design thinking and actually swap it for service design, right? Right, because you can even see service model, service blueprinting. So this is a pejorative service design thinking. Sorry. So user research, you look at level 5, which is 1 to 5, and then 5 is that's it. That's what you want. What does good look like? In other words, with maturity, and you see insights are continuously gathered and used to inform iterative improvements to service delivery. And then regarding accessibility, just at level 3, the org is clear on accessibility expectations, follows good practice in understanding user needs. That's pretty vague. And upfront about applying inclusive design practice. Good, but also a little vague, right? So we need to get better at defining those. If you look at the Scottish approach to service design, another one for you to Google, they center inclusiveness, ethical, and collaborative. That their level 5, which they call embedded maturity, is a focus on users and the life events. That's lived experience. And so the project has a strong focus on understanding the problem as well as designing the solution, continuously improved and challenged, strong focus on the user needs and alignment across users. So those are 2 maturity models that give us some clue about what good looks like. So where to start in the last 4 or 5 minutes of today is like, first to sort of like look at from this EDI or DEI, lens, we go insights of all user groups accounted for, users involved in problem definition, design prototyping, and testing, and for those that are working at the government or at the IT policy level or that are savvy to policy design, it's also at the policy level. In equity, we're talking about bringing in those historically underrepresented communities and enabling participation. And then diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams. There's tons of research on that. I want to just talk about this historicity, and because remember, it's justice that we're looking for. So what really happened, not what the history book showed that happened, right? So in terms of how we define the pain points, the historical pain points in a community, and to make the point that it has to be at all levels of the organization, from not just HR, the executive level, or just the employee level, because just because you have diversity in your organization doesn't mean that those diverse employees are advocating for their communities, nor should they have to. Employee resource groups are used to do that, and it's kind of not fair to put that on the ERG, employee resource group. So we need it down at the service vision and roadmap level. That's what we're talking about here in terms of maturity. Team training is critical. Like every single book on UX management, there's only 4 or 5 of them, emphasizes that. And it's because you need to get your ducks lined up in a row. Everyone needs to be on the same page with this topic. Stakeholder management is critical. I did a SDN workshop a few months ago, actually, on this topic of stakeholder management. And the reason I say like Doe is I spoke to a service design manager recently, service design director, who said that she thought that stakeholder management was a terrible idea, and that the senior executive should be doing that, not us. And I just burst out laughing because I thought that's hilarious, but you have to do stakeholder management and you have to do it well. It's not something you can opt out of, unfortunately, nor is the organizational focus of service design. As Jamin Hageman at Capital One puts it, it's not just orchestrating touch points, but orchestrating organizations. So team sport UX is non-negotiable, really, in doing service design. In UX, you can kind of just do it, just UX design, you can kind of go off in the corner, but not. So these are the kind of areas where it's important that you have stakeholder participation, internal and external, and that you're showing value with what you're doing. So inclusive recruiting is another area, and I've got an example here. This is an intersectional approach. So you could have like 20 user total sample size. Half of those are Black, half are female, and then half of those have disabilities. Half of the 20, so 10 users, and they're also Black and female, and then LGBTQIA for another 10 users who are also Black and female. So you see how this is how you can bring representation, because it starts with recruiting. We leave people out with the insights we gather in user research. Wonderful book by Annie Jean-Baptiste, who's the head of inclusive design at Google, that, it's a team mentality, and it's important that it's managed not just as a, flavor of the month, or wait for the next, Black guy in America to die at the hands of the police, which is George Floyd, is really what focused all this, right, in 2020. But to make sure that we have this ongoing, systematically embedded throughout our organizations and throughout the work that we do, and that we're doing that inclusion advocacy and disability advocacy. Let's get some questions and comments. And I just wanted to say, again, if this was valuable, I've just literally a few days ago opened up my inner circle for free master classes and mini classes. I do a whole bunch of other things, but if you want to sign up there, uxinnercircle.com. And I guess time for a couple of questions here as we come to a close. Anybody feel free to chat.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions, to be honest. I think I even have to go back and rewatch it because it's so many good information and everything. I would first ask, I think you gave a lot of very good book recommendations there, but more specifically on the topic of inclusive design while we wait for your book. What is like the main book that you would say somebody can have a look to start getting into it?
Yeah, the last one I put there, Building for Everyone, by Annie Jean-Baptiste, head of inclusive design at Google. Interesting that in her career, she actually started out in HR. So she came into HR, and then they moved her into a product role, and then moved her and realized how important it was to manage inclusive design. And so then she became and she's been head of inclusive design for the last 4 or 5 years. And so then that's that whole connecting from, we have organizations that wholly committed to, inclusivity at the employee level. And then the service designers and the team that are doing service design or UX work don't have processes, don't have tools. and also maybe have management that don't understand the importance of an equity-led approach.
Yeah, that's fair. I see that we are not getting so many comments, but maybe we can comment on Sony's previous one of the last exercise. So he mentioned like feelings in the park that are what feelings of safety in the park is really drives it, right? So what do you think about it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so one thing in service design that that's important to identify is we talk about evidence in service design, providing physical evidence in our blueprints, like artifacts that show the service is being delivered, like the side of the Starbucks cup that says, Frank, here's your hot drink, and you go, oh yeah, that's my drink, instead of taking somebody else's. But we also need to provide intangible value, or and so a lot of service design is intangible evidence. It's intangible. So yeah, feelings, as Sony points out there, feelings in the park, how you feel when you're in there, right? Not how you feel when you go there, but how you feel when you come out of there, really, I think, so that you don't feel unsafe or unwelcome, or so that you can do what you need to do, which in a park might be, for those girls, it was, having a private conversation in a small, with bushes or some kind of structure blocking so that you're not exposed, where they found the boys were okay with the big open spaces. And it may actually come from the fact that the lived experience of women walking in cities has a lot to do with safety and harm, right, in terms of feeling unwelcome or feeling threatened. And
Yeah.
where boys don't have the sort of the privilege of just, you walk into any public space, take it over, do your thing and leave, so it's a very different social need. Intangible value is so important. It's also important to make the case as a service designer for intangible value in your organization, because a lot of people don't get it. No one talks about it. No one measures it. It's, because it's like feelings. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Like, let's get on with the blueprint. Let's get on with the roadmap,
Yeah,
So
and I
yeah.
think it's so important, right? Because everything that we have is a feeling, right? It's like the way we interact with the world is kind of our own interpretation of it. So, of course, you have to feel safe and welcome and everything like that. So you have to take that into consideration. And I feel personally that service design has the space as well to work with those immaterialities and the untangible.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Excellent. Excellent. Felipe, did you want to ask one of your questions here as we wrap? Do we have time for another question or two?
Yeah, I think we're about the time to end, but I thank you very much for your time. And I think if anybody has any other questions as well and they rewatch this video, they can always put there in the comments and we're going to try to attend to them.
I was going to say, reach out on LinkedIn. Again, if you want to, I actually do have a webinar for UX Inner Circle members. As a whole library. I have a library of like 250 of my videos for the last 25 years. That's part of the Inner Circle membership, but there is one there about intangible value, and maybe we'll do another one coming up as well. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me either through LinkedIn or through the UX Inner Circle. There's a way you can message me just directly from that site, and I'll get back to you. And I would love to hear from you, and keep doing all the good work. And I hope this was helpful. I hope, where to start, just start now, like, I think, be clear and don't just be a user advocate, be an inclusion advocate. It's a slightly different thing, and it's important to differentiate that. Same with disability. Don't just say you're doing inclusion and then lump disability into that. Disability requires its own special type of advocacy, because there are many types of disabilities, and it's a whole lens, it's a whole understanding of that need, and it has the technical side, sure, but it also has an equity side. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And Felipe, thanks for hosting. It was great to carry on and keep calm.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for your time.
Take care.
So thank you very much, everybody that joined us today. It was absolutely great to have Frank with us today. So thank you very much for joining. And a big thank you to the community that was here joining and engaging with us here live. Of course, it is going to be recorded, and then later on you can always interact again with this content. And stay connected with us in our social medias to get updates on the future episodes of SDN Community Voices. And I hope to see you all next Thursday.